Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and today we are going to actually build our main character. Right now we have our level 1. Again, hopefully yours is a lot more complicated and larger than mine. But a level is great by itself, but it could be even better once we put a character in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new scene to hold our character. So scenes can be either actual scenes like levels, or our main our level selector screen is going to be a scene, or it can be something called an object. And an object is just anything that you can put into a game that has complicated stuff attached to it, like colliders and scripts and whatnot. So our main character is going to be an object, but we create it the same way we would create a new scene. So we're going to click this plus button here. And inside this new scene, instead of having a 2D scene root node, we're going to grab a character body 2D. That's going to be the root node for our scene. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this to player. All right, so now that we have a new scene, we've renamed it, or we've added a new node, we've renamed it to player. Let's go ahead and save our scene. Now, we don't want to put this in our scenes folder. We want to put this in our objects folder, right? All of our objects are going to go into our objects folder. So let's click save. So now I can see that I have a player object in my objects folder. Perfect. The next thing I need is I'm going to need a way to host the artwork that's going to be on this player. And we're going to use a special node called an animated sprite. Animated sprite 2D. This animated sprite 2D is going to allow us to create animations on our character. So let's click the animation tab here. And in here we want to select the sprite frames for the default animation. Or we at least want to set up the ability to create sprite frames. All we have to do is click this down arrow, click new sprite frames. And now we need to click on the sprite frames we just created so that we can edit them. So I'll click there. And notice down here we get our animations panel. Let me just adjust my windows. There we go. All right, so we get a default animation. I'm going to overwrite that default, and I'm going to call it idle. All right, so this is going to be the animation where our character is basically just standing there, just kind of bobbing up and down. All right. Now, to attach the frames that we want to this animation, we have to click this waffle button here. So I'm going to click on that, and we're going to select the player artwork here. Click open. Now it's trying to slice up our sprite sheet in a way that makes sense. Right now it's looking at it's created a 4x4 grid. That's not what we want. We only want 2x2 because we have one frame here, one frame here, one frame here, one frame here. So 2 horizontal, 2 vertical. So let's change that to 2x2. Okay, and so now we have a perfect segments of our sprite sheet. Our frames are perfectly set. So we're going to create the idle animation. So I want the 2 frames that are related to the idle. So this frame and that frame. I'll click add 2 frames. And now if I were to play the animation, I can see here that my character bobs up and down. The lights blink like they're supposed to. Okay, perfect. Because all we're doing is swapping back and forth between these 2 frames. Now let's say I don't like the speed of that. What I can do is I can change the frames per second here. Let's make it, I don't know, 10. Oh gosh, that's way too fast. All right, so I'm going to change it back to 5. But if your animation feels like it's sluggish or whatever, you can change the speed. Or if it's too fast, you can slow it down. Okay. Next, we need to create another animation. And this is going to be for our run animation. So run. We're going to do the same thing. We'll click the waffle button, click our player sprite sheet. We'll zoom in a bit. change this to a 2x2 grid, and then we'll select these 2 frames for run. And when I play that, we can see that the wheels are back, he's moving forward a little bit, and that is our run animation. Nothing crazy, nothing special, but it is effective. It does what it's supposed to do. Okay. I think that's about it for animations. Let's go ahead and add a collider to this guy. Now notice that we just created the run animation and it's kind of stuck in run. What we can do is over here with our animated sprite 2D selected, we can actually change it to the idle animation, so that's on by default, which is what we want. All right, let's create a collider around this character. So I'm going to add a child node. It's going to be a collision shape 2D. And for characters, I always like to use a round, either a circle shape or a capsule shape, because I like the bottom of the character to have a round collider. That way, whenever it's running along flat surfaces, it's a lot smoother. If it was a box, then the corner of the box might get stuck in some of the areas of the world. So I like to use a circle shape. And we'll just roughly cover the character. All right, looks good to me. Perfect. I'm going to just save my scene real quick. I'll save all scenes. Why not? So we can lock in those changes that we've just made. Okay, now we get into a little bit of programming. Now, while you panic, I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. Okay, calm down. It's not that big of a deal, especially because Godot 4, the newest version of Godot, actually gives us a default script or a template that we can use that will get our character moving around, and we don't have to do any programming really at all. So let me show you how that works. So I have my player selected. I'm going to click plus script. Now notice in the template here, it automatically selected character body 2D basic movement. We want that. That's what we want. That's going to give us all the code we need in order to make our character move around. The one thing we do want to change, though, is this path. We don't want the script to go into our objects folder. We created a scripts folder specifically for this reason. So let's click the folder button here. Let's go up, go to scripts, and click open. So now it's going to go into our scripts folder. And we'll create. Oh gosh, look at all this code. Okay, I'm going to go through this code line by line so that we know exactly what all of this stuff means. This is important to understand because if you want to make changes to this code, you need to know where to make the changes. So, line 1, extends character body 2D. That just means it's bringing in a bunch of code from this character body node that allows some of this stuff to happen. So don't delete that, don't get rid of it. We need that in order for the script to work. Then we have a couple of constants. Constants are things that won't change within the script. You can change them as the programmer, but they're not going to change as you go through the script. So the constant speed is set to 300. So if your character is running too fast or too slow, that's where you would change that. Constant jump velocity, this means how high are we going to jump? So that is set right here. It's at -400. Remember in Godot, if you want to go up on the Y, or if you want to go up, you go a negative on the Y. Then we have a variable. Variables are things that can change, and this may change as your character, gets heavier or finds a floatier environment to be in or whatever. But this is a variable called gravity. And what this note says is it gets the gravity from the project settings to be synced with rigid body nodes. So this is in project settings, get setting, physics 2D default gravity. So if we were to go to project settings and follow this path, so physics 2D default gravity. So right now default gravity is set to 980 and the gravity vector is 1 on the Y, meaning we're going to pull things down. If we were to change this to -1, it would pull things up. Okay, so if you want to change your gravity, that's where you would do it. Alrighty. Then we have something called a function. It starts with this keyword func. And this function specifically is called physics process delta. This is a function that will run its code every single frame of the game. So every time that we fire off a frame, This game runs at 60 frames per second. All the code inside of this function, and by inside I mean indented underneath, just like Python, if you've ever done any Python programming, if it's indented underneath, it is inside the function. So all of this code will run 60 times per second. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add the gravity. We're going to check to see if the character is not on the floor, so if they're not on a collider, right? If they're not, then we are going to velocity.y, meaning how fast it's moving on the y-axis. We're going to plus equals, meaning we're going to add gravity times delta. Delta is just a shorthand for time. So basically we're just going to pull the character down by the force of gravity over time. Then we want to handle the jump if input.isAction just pressed, meaning did I just push a button that's related to an input, and the input that we're looking for is UI accept. So if we go to our project settings and go to our input map, let's show the built-in actions here. We can see that there are a couple of actions that have been built in. UI accept is on the enter key, the keypad enter, or the space bar. So whenever I push the space bar, then it's going to trigger this action. So input is action just pressed, space bar or enter, and is on floor, meaning it has to be on a collider, and I have to push the space bar or the enter key. If I do that, then velocity.y equals jump velocity. We add this jump velocity to our y, to our movement on the y-axis. Alrighty. Then we're going to take the input direction. So we're going to handle movement here. We're going to take the input direction and we're going to change the way we move based on what button we press. Again, that project settings input map has specific keys that are already binded to it. So UI left is left on the arrow keys, or a joypad if you have a controller connected, then it'll be left on the controller. Same thing for right. Okay, so those keys are already binded. So our directions, we're creating another variable. Direction is going to equal input.getAccess UI left, UI right. So our direction is going to be based on what button we're pushed. And if we have a direction, meaning if we're pushing a button, then velocity.x, meaning how fast we're moving on horizontal axis, is going to equal our direction times our movement speed. But if we are not pushing a button, then our velocity x is going to move toward 0. So what that means is instead of stopping immediately, it's going to kind of slow down to a stop. Okay. Then we call this function called move and slide. Move and slide is we'll just take all of these velocities and directions and everything else, and it will apply it to your character specifically. Without this, there won't be any movement at all. Okay, so that's the whole script that we didn't have to write. It was just given to us, which is great. Because now what we can do is, let's go ahead and save everything. Let's go back to level 1, and let's instantiate our player into level 1. So my player is up here. I'm going to just go ahead and drop it on this platform. And let's test the game. Let's see if this script works the way we want it to. So I'm going to go ahead and play. And it does. Look at that. So I'm moving back and forth. Let's try jumping. Jumping works. Beautiful. Okay, so this works. And my one-way platforms work the way that I want them to. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so this game looks fantastic already. We're able to move our character, and we didn't have to write any lines of code at all. But there's a problem. Maybe you noticed the problem. When I'm running to the right, it's great. But when I try to run backward, he kind of moonwalks, right? That's not great. We don't want that. Plus, our animations aren't playing. Whenever we run, our animation doesn't work. So let's fix those two problems before we consider the... And there's also another problem. This is only part of my level. I want to be able to go over here. But the camera's stuck here. So we have to fix that problem as well. So let's go ahead and fix these problems. So problem number 1, our animations. Well, all we have to do is tell our character that whenever it moves to the left, then it needs to flip on the H. The animated sprite needs to flip on the H, which is the horizontal axis. So what we can do is we can go down here and say if direction. So this is where we're actually moving, right? And let's see. Oh, you know what? Let's just fix the animation for when it's running. So if we're running, then we're going to add a line of code here. What I did was I went to the end of line 24. I hit enter. Notice that it's indented twice perfectly for me. Don't delete those indents. You want this to be lined up exactly with the line above it. And I'm going to type $ animated sprite 2D. Now notice that it found what I was looking for. Once that tooltip pops up saying, hey, I think you're trying to look for the animated sprite, you can hit tab and it will finish it for you. The reason why we use a $ is because we're accessing a node that's attached to the we're accessing a child node of the parent that we're programming for. So right now we're programming the player, but we're accessing one of its child nodes, so we use the $. Alrighty. And we want the animated sprite 2D to play an animation. And the animation we want to play is run. So animated sprite 2D play run. That is the line of code that we needed to add in order to make our run animation work. Now, let's do the same thing. I'm going to copy this. But instead, whenever we're not running, so in the else here, we're going to paste that line of code in, and instead of run, it's going to be idle. Meaning, whenever we're not running, we're going to go back to idle. All right, let's save and test that. No main scene. Oh, you know what? Yeah, let's go ahead and just select. Nah, I'm just going to keep playing it from here. Oh, gosh. All right, go back to level 1, then play. Okay. Hey, look, my run animation works. Whenever I'm running, notice that my wheel is kind of popping back. That's my run animation. Perfect. So that's problem 1 solved. Let's fix problem 2. Problem 2 was that my animation needs to flip whenever I'm facing a different direction. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, if direction. Okay, so under here, we're going to write our own if statement. We're basically going to check to see if our velocity.x is less than 0. Meaning, if it's less than 0, it means we're going this way. We're going to the left. Don't look at my thumb on the camera. It's going to be reverse. Anyway, it's going to mean we're going to the left, right? If it's less than 0. If it's greater than 0, then we're going to the right. So let's go ahead and write this. At the end of line 25, after this animated sprite 2D line that we wrote, I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to write if velocity.x is less than 0. And we need this colon at the end of the statement. Okay. Now, oh no, we have an error. The only reason why this error popped up is because we have to have something after the if. So we're going to hit enter. There has to be some kind of code inside the if in order for it to work. So we're going to access that animated sprite again. There we go. And we are going to flip underscore h. We're going to set that equal to true, meaning that we're going to flip the horizontal. Now, that's the exact same thing as coming over here, selecting our animated sprite, going to, is it transform? Nope. Where is it? Right here, in offset. If we hit flip H, we're basically turning that on, but we're doing that with code. So this line of code will turn that on. Okay. All right, perfect. Now we want to write another if statement. So I'm going to hit enter, but I'm going to backspace one because I want my if statement to be on the same line as this if statement. So if velocity.x is greater than 0, then we're going to do the same thing. So I'll copy and paste. And instead of true, we're going to set it to false. So what we're saying is if we're going to the left, then we're going to flip our h. If we're going to the right, we're not going to flip our h. All right? So let's save that. Hello? Oh, did I click save as? Save all scenes. Let's make sure we have level 1 selected, and let's preview. So I'm running to the right. Everything looks good. As soon as I run to the left, oh, look. I flipped my character, so now he runs perfectly. His animations work great. Everything looks fantastic. And again, like I said, you can change the jump speed or the jump power if you'd like. You can change the run speed. All of that is changeable within the script. All right, so my character works. The last thing we need to do is we need to get... Oh. It's going to happen every video, I guarantee it. My light's going to turn off at some point. Okay, the last thing we need to do is we need to get a camera to follow this player around. And we're gonna very quickly, very easily add a camera to this player, but we're going to set some parameters so that the camera only goes within a certain range. Okay, so first let's go ahead and add a camera. So with our player selected in our level 1 scene, we are going to add a child called a camera 2D. And now that it's a child of the player, it will literally just follow the player around no matter where they go. That's as easy as it gets, right? But the problem is, I'm going to need a platform there. The problem is we don't want it to go past this area. We want the camera to stay locked within our level. So what we can do is we can grab some rulers, some guides. Now it looks like my 0 on the X and my 0 on the Y are perfect, so I don't actually need a guide for that side to tell me how far the pixels are. But if I want to figure out exactly how far this line is, I'm going to click and drag within that ruler and bring it over to where I want my edge to be. Looks like it's 975 pixels. Okay, so in my camera, I can come over to limit, and I can set limits. So the left limit is going to be 0. The top limit is going to be 0. The right limit is going to be 975. Okay. Now let's figure out the bottom limit. So I want it to be about there. We'll call that 590. So now whenever I play the game, the camera will stay within those limits. It'll never drop farther down than where I told it, and it will never go past the edges of the screen. It'll stay locked in that position. Perfect. Okay, we have a functional game. Our camera system works, our player moves around, we can actually play our level, and we can test. So I'm going to make sure I add another platform here just because I have to. It's going to be, tile map. Grab the tile. Need one right about there. Perfect. Okay, so now you can play test your game and see if it works. Next, we're going to get into adding some obstacles or enemies into this project. So go ahead and save your project and then make any adjustments you need, and I will see you next time.